A little bit of the development of the car was basically to take the shape of the original CTR-1, and it has an overall length that makes it a really compact size. So that was, and obviously this is RUF's icon, you know, so really sort of starting off with that, not exceeding that length. And so with the wheelbase going out 20 millimeters in the front, and then going back 50 millimeters in the back, and with the cockpit, basically, as low as we can get what we call the H point right here, so that you're really kind of sitting right in the cockpit. The length of the fenders, all that's the same, but really the clever bit starts to come in wheelbase, and then starting to get into plan view. So if I start to look at what happens in top view of the car, and we have the silhouette of the cockpit into that rear area. And then what happens is that as we have extended the wheelbase and the tires come out and track, we're much wider. And this is where some of the really interesting tricks start to happen. So we have an intercooler back here that comes out, and we have the length of the engine, because of the shortened gearbox and all of that, is more compact. So I came up with the idea of widening the door section by 30 millimeters a side. The normal door is probably around here. And if you look at an original car, you'll see that the door section is actually pretty shallow. And to really kind of make this whole thing work, bring that door out, and now the distance to the outside of the wheels and tires is very little. And then you start to develop that out, which also creates a better aerodynamic section, and that starts to come in like that. But if you just sort of come down to the back, you can start to see how the whole car becomes more succinct, and the overall length isn't any longer than the original car, but the width is on the back. So if we start to look at that, and we start to look at the whole car, then the idea is that it's really a double take from the original CTR to the new CTR, except for all the technology. So it's really a lot of tricks, design tricks and proportional tricks. And so when you put the two cars together, the new car is going to visually be squatter, better stance, better visual stability, as well as actual stability, better aerodynamics. It's actually lower because than the original car, so the frontal area goes down. Then you get into how do you cool this thing? How do you start to feed this thing? So that's really where I started to look at the cockpit. So if that's the CTR cockpit, and then here we have the back window, and everything visually, I wanted it to have these really natural lineups. So here's your core, here's your wheel, here's the front wheel. So the NACA, which I find is a real iconic piece of the original prototype, I wanted to make that work with all of this. So you take what we call the shut line back here, and what I did was I started to line all of this stuff up and make this all flow through. And then, so everything is starting to happen as you walk your eye around the car. Everything is flowing. It has visual lineups. Everything is starting to work. And then the quarter window, I started to make that for cold air induction into the intake system. And this is where design and aesthetic starts to come together. And the wider doors start to give the car just wider shoulders and make it so that the car starts almost like it went to the gym. And these are just all really areas that are subliminal to someone who's looking at the car. They just see something where it's the same person, but this person's gone to the gym. And that all helps to lighten visually the body. You know, things like that. It's really not reinventing the wheel. It's more about respecting what's there. And for me, this was really important on this car so that someone could really appreciate the evolution of RUF in creating that evolution into something that had meaning and purpose and also the DNA that was really important, so that when somebody saw the car that they just said, that's a RUF. The glass, for the most part, is all flush going around the back. We retained also the vent that's at the very top, which I thought was a really important thing to maintain because it also serves a function of ventilating the cockpit. And then the next part really was the flush door handles. Another evolutionary part that sort of says it's about aerodynamics and just absolutely beautiful smoothness. This area was always crowded. It almost felt as though that it was forced. And so when we widened the door, we could relax that section a little bit. It allowed us to really refine this along with the headlight. And so now all of a sudden this looks so much more natural all the way through. And you'll see that in the future that this core that we have will really start to develop into other things. So, and that's really what my vision was for the car. RUF really came out of the cloth of Porsche, and customers who bought a RUF, they wanted an edited machine. They wanted something analog. They didn't want something that did something for you. And really, what makes it a RUF is not trying so hard. Whereas other manufacturers would be trying to wow you with styling. So when you look at a RUF versus, let's say, the normal 911, you would immediately identify what the RUF is. It's like someone you grew up with, and for some reason, your friend, everything they did to their bicycle was unique. It made it faster, it made it better, all these little tricks that they did along the way. The CTR really incorporates all of those tricks. There's nothing on here that doesn't need to be there. Yet, when driving this vehicle, this car, this CTR on the road, it is so smooth, so much in control, but it is the closest thing that you can get to perfection in the sense of what is the perfect everyday car. And that's what this is. It's not trying to be lower than anybody else. It's very comfortable in its skin. It knows what it is. And that's the other disruptive part of it, because there is no part left that is Porsche. It is every single part has been developed by RUF, down to the gearbox and the engine, the suspension, the chassis, the body, lots and lots and lots of little tricks, and usually the tricks that you don't see. And that's what makes it.
So what's left that is Porsche?
Very little. Very little. You know, it could end up being the windshield. The idea of the CTR3, I envisioned for RUF to create this kind of Le Mans coupe. And so the front tub of the 997 at that time, and the 997 and the Boxer and the Cayman were all the same. So what I did was I said, okay, let's get this thing as low as possible. And then what's the tallest tire I could put on there using all of this in the front, the whole crash structure, all this stuff in the front. And then looking at as much of it that I can utilize. And then the idea is to create a super low roof line. But let's take a look at the engine. So here's the flat 6 with the gearbox. And I'm going to end up at about 2,650 millimeters about. So if I start to look at what I have already, I have that. And then the roof line, I wanted this absolute small roof line like this. And then every line had to make sense. The venting in the back was really kind of a throwback to a lot of the Le Mans coupes. And then utilizing the taillights that were there, and then with the diffuser, because from the gearbox here, you can start to then come up like that. And even the door handle, everything had to work as in harmony. Even the shut line, the way that came down through there. So, and of course, you know, the silhouette and all of that, the way it starts to, and this was a car that, you know, I convinced Alois to do because I felt it was really the first step in creating your own car. And this has become quite a successful car for him. But everything that I design has to have a start and a finish. It has to always feel as though that it's resolved. Nothing on it has to be, I don't appreciate design that is unresolved. And I also like things that are based off of function. So as this goes along, and of course, the roof, you know, wheels are really important, you know, because they become an evolution to themselves, because it's an absolute evolution, a technical evolution of the original roof wheel. And I think there's so much DNA left in that. And that really kind of, again, goes back into the whole idea of being unstyled. You know, everything on this car is there for a reason, and it just happens to be just like aircraft. There are beautiful aircraft and there are ugly aircraft. And obviously we wanted this one to be a beautiful aircraft. And for me, everything has to evolve. It has to be something that, it has to be thoughtful, it has to be really well resolved technically as well as aesthetically. It has to work. It's got to be something that has to be professional. And it's a lot of fun to design and develop. I mean, that's why I've done this as a career, as a passion. It's something that you know, I feel fortunate to be able to be a part of and to do.